Yeah, it's ridiculous to get with this.
Oh, the elf just took over the set. Shit, make it live. Let's go.
Want my DJ revolving.
Check out DJL7.com.
We'll have to carry on a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature.
Okay, so let's start off with Geoff Young. He's actually my candidate of the year for the first year that I had the unified platform. And he's actually has an amazing background. I hope he talks about it right now. Go ahead, Geoff. Why don't you make some opening remarks? Let's go.
I was a Green. I was a member of the Kentucky Green Party. And I ran for the Kentucky House of Representatives, my little section of Lexington, Kentucky, in 2012. And the Green Party barely exists in Kentucky. So we had trouble getting more than, enough, 7 members to be on the executive committee, and they were not interested in doing any work. So I ran in 2012 and just learned the mechanics of how you run for office, how you get on the ballot and all that kind of thing. 2014, I ran as a Democrat. The Democratic Party rigged it. They rigged the primary by providing all kinds of in-kind support to my only Democratic opponent, equally unknown candidate. In 2015, I ran for the Democratic nomination for governor. I had one opponent, the current Attorney General, and they rigged that in the same way, and I sued them. I filed many lawsuits over the years between 2015 and today, and they've all been thrown out before trial, before discovery. They've been thrown out at the very initial phase. I concluded the entire judicial branch is corrupt. 2022 U.S. House as a Democrat again in the primary, and I won that. 2022, I won the primary because no Democrat, no well-known wealthy Democrat wanted to run against me. They didn't want to get sued, I guess. So I actually won the nomination. The entire party, from the Frankfurt headquarters, every county, supported the Republican incumbent for the U.S. House. My entire party supported the enemy. I guess I was a worse enemy in their mind than the existing far right wing, pro-war, corrupt, Andy Barr. So I learned an interesting lesson that year. This year, I'm running for the Kentucky House of Representatives again as a member of the Kentucky Party. 2025, we formed a new party, third party in Kentucky. We have very short, simple bylaws. Our platform is we're pro-peace and anti-corruption, and that's it. And anybody can join the Kentucky Party, any Kentuckian, and we'll help you get elected. And we won't try to tell you to change your position on any issues. We don't have any purity tests like the Democrats and Republicans do. We won't support your opponent. And I think every state should have, there should be an Ohio party, a Massachusetts party, a California party. Every state should do it because the two major parties are 100% corrupt today and 99% evil. They're all pro-war. They all support the genocide going on in Gaza since October 2023. The two parties are worthless. That's my introductory opening statement. If you don't mind.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
You're
Geoff.
welcome.
You're truly an inspiration. So, Theo, why don't you make your opening remarks about Rep My Block? I'm ambassador for my Black and Proud to represent that brand. Go ahead, Theo.
Rep My Block is a tool built by candidate, for ballot access for free. So by removing the financial element from the process, we can make sure that we get ballot access no matter what. And taking from the experience from the Republican, from the Democrat, from the Green, and bringing all that together to remove the weaponization of the ballot access. Because that's how they play it. They play it by weaponizing the whole process before you get to the ballot is being weaponized to drive candidates like you and myself and even DJ, Dion, and everybody else crazy. The process is really about money. And every election lawyer or every consultant will tell you to get on the ballot, you need to pay me, and then we'll make sure you get on the ballot. So you need to start by $5,000. We remove everything. All you need to do is follow the rule, knock on door, and use sweat equity to get it done. Either on the Republican Party, on the Democratic Party, on the Conservative Party, Dion, or the Working Families Party. We will help you get there. Or independent, doesn't matter. We don't have any. Rep My Block doesn't have any judgment about who should make the ballot and who should vote. It is a question for the voter to decide who will be the candidate that they want them representative.
So actually, to the highlight of today's show, okay, Jay Townsend, actually, if you do a search on YouTube and you type in the word political consultant, he's the first and pretty much the only name that comes up. That's a highly desired slot by any candidate who's running. We're going to have a presentation by Jay Townsend, our keynote speaker.
I want to address what you've been talking about. The rules about getting on the ballot are written by the leaders of the two parties in legislative bodies in 50 different states. I'm not sure that any two states are the same. And those rules also are fashioned by counties and cities who sometimes have their own set of rules within the confines of what legislatures allow. So naturally, if you have the leaders of two major political parties writing the rules about who gets to run and what minor parties are allowed to exist, they are going to make this as difficult as possible. I happen to live in a state where it is incredibly difficult. If I know some of you live in New York, but it is hell to get on the ballot in New York. As a major party nominee, it's even harder to get on as a minor party candidate. And I mention this just to remind you all, the rules are set there to trip you. They make them difficult. And while New York is difficult because of the sheer number of signatures you have to get that withstand a lawsuit that challenges the validity of those signatures, you can go to other places, and I'll mention just one, the state of Arkansas. If you're a Republican wanting to run for Congress in Arkansas, you cannot get on the ballot there unless you cut a check for $30,000 to the state Republican Party, which effectively eliminates anybody who can't come up with $30,000 just to get on the ballot. That's $30,000 that's not spent on advertising or candidate travel or anything else. So the rules are unjust. Maybe one of these days we'll get some reform, but about the only choice we have now is make sure we understand the rules, follow them to the T, and be prepared for when your signatures or your check is challenged. I come from a different angle here. I just work in a lot of campaigns where this is kind of pro forma, how we get on the ballot and is taken care of at the staff level. quite often I'm brought into campaigns to help guide the strategy. And I want to give you an overview today, and it applies to you even if you don't have a consultant helping you. What I call the 5 pillars of a decent campaign strategy. I'm going to try and put this on the screen and see if it works. So I'm going to say one thing at the outset today. If you are going to take notes on anything, take notes on these 5. These are the 5 pillars of a political campaign. Once you are fairly certain that you can get on the ballot. If one of those pillars is not there, you will fall short. So they're all equally important. And I'm going to go through each one of these in detail, but these 5 things are worth remembering because they are boxes to check as you put together a campaign. And the very first one is in some ways the most important. This has been my experience in a political campaign. If you do not have a compelling message, no matter how much money you spend, you're going to have difficulty getting traction. And proof of that is there is a whole political graveyard in the United States of wealthy people who tried to buy their way into office and came up short because their message sucked. So it has to be useful. If you've got this right now, I'm going to go into a little bit about what these are and what the considerations are. What is a campaign message? They are questions that voters have for you that they expect you to answer and put in front of their eyeballs in a political campaign. And if voters knew to ask these questions this way, this is what they would ask a candidate. What are you going to do for me? And I hate to burst anybody's bubble who's in public life, but voters really do not care about you. They care about what they're going to get from you. So, question is, what are you going to do for me? What wrongs are you going to right? What injustice are you going to correct? What policies are you going to advance that will improve my quality of life? If your campaign message does not address that, if it's missing that element, you really don't have a campaign message. The second thing is what I call your value statement. Now, here's the thing. You can promise people the world, but they also need to know a little bit about what grounds you. So here's an example. I saw it happen once. I'm sitting in a room in a rural county in Texas. And this candidate got up to talk, and he absolutely had them eating out of his hand. And then somebody, after he finished, said, "What church do you go to?" He says, "I don't go to a church. I'm an atheist." His campaign was over at that point because his values and that culture, everybody in that room goes to a church and they think everybody in that county ought to be going to a church. And when he says, "I don't go to a church, I'm an atheist," it ran counter to everybody in the room and their fundamental notions of what their candidate and their office holders should be. Clearly a case of somebody whose values was out of sync with those in the room. Now that is an extreme example, but somewhere along the way, voters need to know that you care about the same things they care about. And quite often in political campaigns, we demonstrate that with pictures. A picture of a candidate with a group of disabled veterans says that candidate cares about veterans. A candidate reading a book to a little girl on a sofa says that candidate cares about little kids.
A candidate listening to students on a college campus says, I care about what young people think. Something about your moral code needs to be incorporated into your advertising. The third element of a campaign message is what makes you qualified to do the job. Now, a caution, sometimes candidates get really carried away with their resume and they think that's all voters care about. And they'll stand up and they'll give a 5 or 10 minute speech, and all they talk is about everything they've done in their life. Voters don't care about that. All they do want to know is that you've held positions of responsibility, that you have some minimal level of qualifications, that you're capable of doing the job. That's enough to tell them, but you got to tell them something that says, okay, this candidate's got his act together or got her act together. The fourth element is questions that voters have is, how do I know I can trust you? Voters are pretty cynical. They're used to promises that aren't kept. They're used to hearing politicians promise the moon and delivering nothing. So I'm going to take AOC as an example. Something that she has done through the years. She is despised by some, but she's also loved by some in her district. They trust her to do the right thing when she's not looking. How did she earn that trust? How did she demonstrate to voters that she can always be trusted to do what is right by them? Now, they've gotten that impression throughout her career, but they also got that impression in her very first campaign with the video that she put out that won her the election. She put it up, I remember it was 2018. It was about a 2.5-minute video that she put on Facebook. And it was so compelling. The passion in her voice, the way she talked about the underserved, the way she railed about what her opponent had done and who he spoke for, that she established, and in a way, she did a better job of answering that question, why should I trust you, of any of the candidates that I've seen since. It is an essential element because if they trust you, they'll put up with you having a different position than they do, but not the other way around. Now, the fifth piece and component of your campaign message is you have to very clearly, during the closing portion of a campaign, make sure that voters understand what makes you different, why you are the better choice than the candidates you're running against or your opponent. Put it in black and white. Make it clear what they get from you that they will never get from your opponent. Highlight what you are willing to say that your opponents can't say or won't say. Emphasize the policy positions that you're going to advance that your opponent won't. If you make it abundantly clear, voters have a rather easy way of figuring out who they're going to vote for. So this is kind of what I call the 5 basic elements of a campaign message. All of them are pretty important in a political campaign if you expect voters to get a comprehensive idea of what you're all about. Let's go to targeting. And the 3 basic questions you start with. You look at the electorate that you have to appeal to. I was just on a phone call an hour ago with somebody who is going to run for office. He has to win a primary. And I put up a map on the screen. I put up a demographic profile of the electorate. And I started asking him questions. Is there a particular part of this district where people are going to know you well, where you have high name recognition and respect? where you can expect that they're going to vote for you? And he said, yes, it's up in that corner of the district. I'm very well known there because I live there. And I said, okay, now, are there people whose income and economic status would suggest that they may be inclined to support you? He said, yeah, I have a far better appeal to working class voters than I do people who are really, really wealthy. And I said, good. Well, there are a lot of working class voters in this electorate. And I said, let's talk about age groups. What's your appeal to younger voters versus older voters? And he said, well, I have a long history of really fighting for things that help senior citizens. I've fought to cut their property taxes because a lot of them have trouble paying their property tax bill. I've worked hard to cut drug prices. I've made sure that we are talking about improving elder care in this jurisdiction. He says, that should really be one of my strengths. Okay, that got the conversation started. Next thing we did, I says, is who are the voters here that are never going to support you, no matter what you say? And he said, those voters that are making more than $500,000 a year are not going to buy anything I say, because I've said they need to pay more in taxes to help underclass voters. I said, so you're saying there's no point in even trying to advertise to these people? And he said, absolutely not. They're not going to vote for me. If they live in that gated community in those expensive homes, they got no reason to like me. That's not my base. So that's an example of one thing that we were able to take out of the target list, because as he says, no point in even talking to them. We then looked at the electorate and said, okay, well, we're not sure these are working class. Some people have college degrees, but they live in working class occupations. He says, those are people I can persuade, because I can talk about how I'm on their side and I'm going to tax the wealthy to provide something for them. When we were done with that discussion, we then took stock of the people we got rid of, the people we included, and we were able to come up with the size of our target list. How many people are we going to target in this campaign to put ads in front of eyeballs? There's another campaign I worked on this morning. It's a primary in Texas. It's a really hot primary. We went through that exercise 6 months ago. In that particular case, I got 49,000 people on our target list. They are seeing every ad that we put out. That's the exercise that we did. We started with a congressional district with 650,000 people, and we narrowed it down to a finite list of 49,000 who are seeing our ads. Nobody else is seeing them. That's an example of targeting. Now, everybody's got their favorite tool. I use a software, and I'm just going to mention it in passing because you can get a free trial. And I'm going to put it here if this thing will let me do it. This is a private data vendor. They're one of 3 major data vendors in the United States. I find their software easiest to use. But essentially what they do is they acquire from all 50 states the list of registered voters. And when they know the names and addresses and the age of those voters, they start appending to each record things that they can get from other sources. So I was looking at one of their databases this morning. They can tell me the household income. They can tell me the education level. They even can tell me the credit scores. That's pretty granular data, and that is really invaluable when you're trying to figure out what pieces of the electorate that you can grab. Let's go to the advertising. All right, now say this at the outset. If you're running in a jurisdiction where there are less than 3,000 households, you can knock on doors, and that's the most effective advertising you can do, is going door to door and engaging voters at their front door. It is. You can win a city council race in a small jurisdiction by going door to door, even if you do no advertising. Plus, it's also cheap. All it costs you is time and shoe leather. But most cases, when you've got more than 3,000 people, it's going to be difficult for you and you alone to go knock on every door. And that's where you have to resort to paid advertising. So I've put a few of these here that are kind of staples in the industry right now. Starting with what we call digital IP advertising or targeting. Every person on this phone call is online, which means you have an IP address. And that IP address is unique to you. It's your house or wherever you are. You are using an IP address. There are companies in the United States that maintain an inventory of hot IP addresses that are in use down to the household level. You can now put ads through their system and make a banner ad appear when they log onto their computer and open a website. Very sophisticated. You can also serve people video ads using the same technique. Of all the ways it is to get your logo, your picture in 6 to 8 words in front of their eyeballs, it is the cheapest possible way to do it.
Yeah, I'm the truth.
Bring it up right now.
And we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. We will have to carry on a program, a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart.
This is as real as it gets. The elf just took over the set. To get live, let's go.
Check out DJL7.com.
There's also texting. An email is a way to disseminate a message. Texting will generally cost you between 5 and 7 cents per text. Email, other than the cost to acquire a good email list, the only cost is what vendor you're using to disseminate the email, whether it's MailChimp or Constant Contact or what have you. Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube are 3 social media channels that will permit you to advertise. Facebook and Instagram will allow you to do it down to the person. Here's the way it works. You construct your target list, you upload that list into Facebook. You got to have a political campaign account to do it. And what Facebook will do is match the names and addresses to known Facebook accounts. And then you pay Facebook, after you've created an ad, you pay Facebook to serve that ad to them every time they log into Facebook and Instagram. The downside of this is about half the people in the country anymore do not have an Instagram account or no longer have a Facebook account. That's the downside. The upside is you can reach at least half your voters individually. There is no more precise way to target than by individual person. YouTube does not allow you to target by person, but it will allow you to target by demographic segment or zip code. So if you're running in a general election and you want to hit a certain zip code, what you can do is buy time on YouTube, and when people have clicked on a video to watch something about cooking or whatever, before they can watch it, they're fed your ad. There are 5s, there are 10s, there are 15s, and they can't get out of it until they've seen it all. Much to my surprise, one day I logged into my YouTube account and I couldn't watch my own videos because Bernie Sanders gave me a 15-second pitch to give him money. He actually bought time on my YouTube channel. The next thing is what we call streaming TV. If you're in a local race, it works well. TV is called over-the-top and connected TV. OTT is essentially this. I'm a household that's OTT. I do not have a cable subscription, but I have high-speed internet. I'm an OTT person. There's connected TV. Those are the ones connected to a TV through a cable outlet. Of course, there's cable advertising. If you are running in a jurisdiction and you can buy time as a Democrat, say, and you can buy time on MSNBC, it's probably something you'd want to do because it has a very progressive audience. If you're running in a Republican primary, you're probably going to want to buy Fox News. That's cable. If you're running for governor of Georgia, you're going to have to buy commercial. The Atlanta market is its own TV market. There are 3 or 4 down in South Georgia, but most of the voters in Georgia watch Atlanta TV. They live in that DMA area of dominant influence, and you'll have to use it. It is really expensive, but it's efficient because you're reaching millions of voters every time your TV ad runs. I will also mention persuasion mail. It does cut through the chatter. A lot of the digital stuff, electronic stuff, is hit or miss. And some candidates still swear by it, and I understand it. Why? It's because nothing beats having a piece of paper in your hand that you get in your mail. I live in New York City. I was a targeted voter last year. I kept every mail piece I got in that race for mayor we had last year, and I kept them all. Believe it or not, I'm busy. When it came time for me to vote, I looked at those mail pieces to make my decision. So don't dismiss mail. The problem with mail is to put a mail piece in somebody's hand, you're going to spend between 65 cents and $1 to get it to them. By the time you do the printing and the postage, it's a lot more expensive than, say, digital IP advertising. But it's a very useful advertising tool. In some communities, not all of them, radio still has an application. And I'm doing a campaign this year in Arkansas where we start our radio ads next week for a March primary. It is not all that expensive and it works well. There's nothing glamorous about writing a campaign budget, but if you don't have a budget, you do not have a strategy. The sheer exercise of going through an Excel file and figuring out what your staff costs over the course of a campaign, what it's going to cost you for handouts, palm cards, yard signs, volunteer coordinator, field director, fundraising consultant, digital consultant, and all of this stuff. It really concentrates the mind, because when you fill in all the numbers that you're going to need to pay your staff and all of the ways that you are going to advertise, you'll be shocked at how expensive it is. I do budgets for every single one of my clients because it forces us to make difficult decisions early on. Yes, we're going to do this. No, we can't afford to do that. Because what happens if you have no budget discipline is you start trying to do everything. And if you're not properly funding something that you're doing, the initial investment is going to go to waste. Case in point, I had a candidate who did not read his budget or said yes when he saw it, and then found out after 2 months that he was running short of money. Well, at that point, we had spent a lot of money on Facebook, and we were almost to the point where we were getting past the halfway point. You got to spend a certain amount of money on Facebook, what we call frequency and reach. And he says, I got to cut it off. And I said, you're going to waste every dollar you spent. Because if we don't complete this piece of it, they're not going to remember what you've said. We have to get the frequency to a certain point first. And he said, I should have paid more attention. So the money he spent on Facebook went to waste. So if you've started a campaign and you do not have a budget, if you figured out a strategy and you don't have a budget to go along with it, stop what you're doing and create one. Because if you don't, at some point, you're going to run out of money, and usually you'll run out of it at the worst possible time. Once you have that budget, the final pillar is this. You got to figure out how you're going to raise it. Simple as that. You can craft $1 million budget, but if you can only raise $500,000, you got to revise that budget. So these are 7 different ways that candidates raise money. And under the who section, these are 5 different kinds of people who give money to political campaigns. Now, while we're on this page, it should be self-explanatory, but let's open this up to questions, not only about this page, but everything else I've said here, and see what questions may be in front of you.
Where do, I guess maybe 3 interest groups, but where do the major political parties and clubs play into this? Or you haven't gotten to that, either the endorsement process?
I'm talking about fundraising here, but yes, the Democrat Party is an interest group.
DSA.
Yeah, I mean, I would include them in interest groups. Candidates, once they're nominated by a party, sometimes get campaign contributions from the party to help them. These are broad categories, of course. I've had candidates call me, and I look at the demographic data and I look at their situation, and I have to say, you're running in a district that you cannot win. The rules, it's, a progressive Democrat cannot win an election in rural Iowa. Some right-winger from rural Iowa cannot move to New York and win an election in Bed-Stuy. That's just the way it is. All right. So sometimes I say to them, do you want to run anyway, knowing that it's an uphill battle? And sometimes they say yes. What they want is the podium that comes with being a candidate, because they know they're going to get covered by the media, and it's a chance for them to advance a cause. So let's take your corruption example, Susan. You get a nomination of some party or another, and they consider you a legitimate candidate worth covering. Even if you're running in a race where you cannot win, you have the right to talk about whatever you want to talk about that entire campaign. You can, if it gets bad enough, also win an election when people get so sick of the corruption that they're willing to turn to someone who's not going to steal their money. I think it depends on the level of corruption going on. It's worse in some places than it is in others. I would love for someone to come along and say, enough of these rigging the ballot access laws. Anybody can give $10 to the Board of Elections and their name ends up on the ballot. I would love to wipe that slate clean, because it's a game that's played by both parties and it's unfair. But it takes quite a movement to get that done. Anytime someone calls me and says, I got to start raising money, he said, tell me how to do it. First thing to do is take this out. We all have one of these now, and inside is a contact list. Go through that contact list and look for people who would recognize your face if they ran into you in Paris, France, or would recognize your voice if you called them on the phone. Inside that list is gold. It is the people who know you and respect you and believe in your integrity and your character. If you're like most, you're going to see names you have no idea how they got there, but you're also going to see names of people you would recognize. Make a list of those people on your contact list. The second place to look is your Facebook friends. That comes with pictures. You can open up your Facebook account and look at the pictures and the names. And what you will probably see are the names and pictures of people you forgot that you know. Anybody that you've encountered in your life with whom you have some sort of bond or experience is fair game to call and ask for a campaign contribution. The third place to look is your LinkedIn connections. Most of us do have LinkedIn accounts. We got people on there that we don't know, but we got people on there that we solicited to be a connection way back when we started them. That is the starting point. When I say direct solicitation, no non-incumbent can refuse to be involved in fundraising. If you're a non-incumbent, you don't have a ready list of contributors that you can go to and say, give me money because I'm running for office again. You have to be involved in your own fundraising, because it takes you to get money from your family, your friends, and your relatives. No one can do that better than you can. Now, as you do this, in theory, you're going to find a few people who say, sure, I'll give. And they may even give generously. Treat that person like a kernel of corn that you plant and you water and you fertilize, because the person who gave you money also knows other people who can give you money. And they can connect you to people in their contact list that they know, but you don't. Now, I'll take this to just 2 or 3 examples here. I was newly hired to help a candidate who wanted to run for Congress, a first-time candidate. She wasn't poor. They come from a fairly well-to-do family. And I went through this with her and I said, truthfully, when you file your next FEC report, if you want people to pay serious attention to your campaign, they need to see that you've managed to raise a lot of money in a very short period of time. And I said, let's go through your contact list and figure out who you know that may be able to get to you. Well, one of those people she came across was Danny, a guy named Danny. And she says, well, Danny's been a lifelong friend. Danny's a very wealthy businessman. Let me call, she was in New York when Danny was in Florida. She says, let me call Danny and see what Danny can do to raise some money for me in Florida. I sat there. Danny said, how much do you need? She says, I got to raise $250,000 in the next 3 weeks. Danny says, I'll raise you 80. Just like that. Yeah. It's a kind of out of the box kind of example, but Danny owned a lot of companies. Danny bought a lot of stuff from vendors. Danny, all he needed to do was call some of those vendors and say, I got this friend running for Congress in New York. I want you to cut me a $2,000 check and have it in my office in the next 10 days. Make it out to this campaign. Danny raised her $80,000. That's an example of surrogate fundraising. It's people who have given to you, who take it upon themselves to help you raise more money. Now, that could be somebody who gave you $1,000, who says, you know what, I'll host a cocktail party for you, and I'm going to invite these friends to my house on a Sunday afternoon. We'll charge them $150 to come, and you come spend a couple hours with them. That's one way. Some candidates will say, you know what, I know people who could probably pay $3,500 and it would come to dinner, and you sit down and spend an entire evening with them, and I'll put on a real nice dinner. We'll have 8 or 10 couples here, but you got to promise me that you got to at least spend 2.5 hours having a nice conversation with them. I see that go on all the time. Sometimes a potential surrogate will say, I don't want to do a party, I don't want to do a dinner, but you know what? I'll connect you via email with some people that I think are capable of giving to you. I had a case a couple of years ago where an attorney who was prominent said, I don't want to call anybody, I don't want to email anybody, but I'll say something nice about you, and you can put whatever nice thing I said about you in a letter, and I'm going to give you 20 people whose names you should send that to. We did the letter. It was a 1-page letter with a nice little quote from the attorney about how much he appreciated this candidate and had maxed out to this candidate. That letter raised $10,000 in a week. The names he gave us were really good names. But all it took was that quote. Now, he wouldn't call, he wouldn't email, but he was willing to do that. So that's an example of surrogate fundraising. Once you've had somebody give you money, you treat them with TLC. You maintain a relationship with you because they're essentially investors in your cause. Texting and email, I'm going to touch upon this. I really did like AOC when she ran that campaign because she was proof to me that democracy still works. And she knocked off that guy who'd spent 20 years in Congress. I gave her $20. To this day, 7 years later, I get a text message every day from AOC and an email every day. She never stops asking for money. The secret of her success is that she will prospect. I've seen her run ads on Facebook soliciting fresh donors. But once you've indicated an interest in her or visited her website, she has no qualms about chasing you. Now, here's what's interesting to me is every text message and every email I get from her not only asks for money, but it's about a cause she's trying to promote. Now, on the left, AOC raised $10 million in the first 3 months of 2025. That's how good her list is now. Marjorie Taylor Greene also raised something close to $10 million in small donations. When she was active, she's not doing it anymore, but she never stops asking for money. The fifth one I'll talk about here are what we call large and celebrity events. I'll use this as an example. A client of mine decided to have a big fundraiser in his community, invited 300 people. Couldn't get in the door unless you paid. The celebrity that he advertised that was going to speak at that event was a star football player who was still a household name among a lot of people in the state of Arkansas. He was considered a celebrity. The football quarterback that took them to a championship game. So if you know a celebrity, could be an author, could be a singer, could be a musician, could be a star athlete, could be a prominent political figure, could be someone who is a noted blogger or podcaster or YouTuber. Ask them if they'll come speak at your event, then sell tickets. If you don't know any celebrities, I've seen this done. You invite a bunch of people to a dog and bean dinner on Saturday afternoon, tell them to bring the kids for free, and you serve them chili and hot dogs. You get the chili and the hot dogs donated, and you make some money when a family pays $15 to sit there and eat food. I've seen that work. So there are lots of creative ways to do this. But those are a few ways that you tackle it. But this is the axiom about it. Nobody wakes up wondering if you need a campaign contribution. You got to tell them you need it. You got to tell them why you need it. And sometimes you have to ask them a lot of times. Sometimes they need to see progress in your campaign before they give. But if you don't ask, you don't get. As for who gives to your campaign, we talked about the first two. Let's talk about the interest groups for a second. For every cause, there's generally an interest group that pushes that cause. Moms for Liberty, I've heard that name today. They have a cause to push. Sometimes they give money to candidates. Pro-life groups, pro-choice groups, Emeraldy's List, environmental interest groups. You name a cause, there's an interest group. And quite often they give money. Now, how do you know which ones? You go look at the campaign reports that have been filed in your jurisdiction or your state, and you look at the interest groups that have given to candidates in the past. They're there. Pick the ones with which you are naturally aligned and call them and ask them, or interview them, or ask them for a campaign contribution.
Yeah, I'm the truth.
And we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. We will have to carry on a program, a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart. And
What y'all wanna do? Oh, the elf just took over the set. Shit's up to get live. Let's go.
we will have to carry on a program, a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature.
Number 4, not all candidates run against somebody who's absolutely hated. But if you do have the luck of running against somebody who's despised, there are a lot of people who may give you money just because they don't like your opponent. Do you remember a guy named Beto O'Rourke in Texas? He raised $85 million in his race against Ted Cruz for the Senate in 2018. It wasn't because they loved Beto. It's because at that time there are a lot of people in the country who absolutely despised Ted Cruz. Lindsey Graham from South Carolina ran into the same problem. In his last Senate race, he discovered there were a lot of people in the country that really don't like him either, because his opponent raised $115 million. He still got beat, but he scared the bejesus out of Lindsey Graham. So don't dismiss this, that there may be people who don't like the person you're running against. They'd be more than willing to help you win. Now, the final thing I'll talk about are what we call investors. What's an investor? If you're running for an office where you have some authority over certain kinds of people, or you're voting on appropriations for certain kinds of services, there are people who have to do business with that government entity. They're going to want access to you if you win. And if they think there's a possibility that you might win, they're going to be amenable to making a contribution to you. Now, I'm being really candid about the way money works. And I'm going to say this at the outset. I had a candidate tell me that he wasn't going to ask anybody for money because that would corrupt him. And I said, here's your problem, that you're corruptible. Doesn't make you corrupt to ask others to help you advance your cause. But if you're afraid that asking for money is corrupting, it's because you don't have the moxie to tell a contributor no. You're afraid that because they give you $1,000 that you got to do anything and everything they would ask you to do. And that's your problem, not their problem. Don't let it bother you. If it's green and they're willing, take it. It doesn't need to change your moral code or what you're willing to say no to or yes to.
You see, that was going to be my question, Jay, if I could chime in.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to address that. for Susan that even me, when you get to a certain point, you should be discerning of whose money you take, and that is one way to, I think, weed out corruption long term with your personal kind of train. But here's my question for you: do you ever talk any of your clients down from running for office, or running for a more winnable position that may be a lower position? For example, I have people that I'm running for Congress that don't even know anything about the game. And I was like, oh, you should take a step below, since you're from New York like me, and run for assembly this cycle, because that may be more winnable for you, a small pool. So that's my question. Have you ever talked clients down? You know what I mean?
Have I?
Yes.
I make clear they understand how high the mountain is. Now, let's take Congress. 82% of the people who serve in Congress held a different office before they were elected to Congress. That is almost the American way to work your way through the political system. You're elected to something, you do a good job, you gain prominence, you gain a following, then you maybe go from city council to running for the state legislature, and you put in a few good years. Let me take Chuck Schumer as an example. He was elected to the New York Assembly when he was 22 years old. He did a pretty good job, and then he ran for Congress. And he sat there for many, many years until he got a shot at Al D'Amato in 1998. Then he took his leap. That's the traditional way to prominence in Congress and the U.S. Senate. Some members of Congress serve a few years and then they run for the U.S. Senate in their states. Now, there are ways around that. But you got to come to a campaign with a certain number of what I call chips to pull it off. Chips you got on the table when you sit down that makes you a prominent candidate having never held another office. Now, these chips come in this form. You've latched onto an issue and it's catching on like wildfire, and you can ride that to prominence with eloquent speeches. That's one. Those are a form of chips. Barack Obama owes his success in politics in part to the eloquence of his words. So did Ronald Reagan. There were magnetic people who were very well spoken. John Kennedy probably won the presidency because of, in part, his ability to inspire people. All right. Another form of chips. I'll take Michael Bloomberg. When he sat down at the table, never having held elected office, and said, I want to run for mayor, he's immediately taken seriously. Why? Because he had $100 million in his back pocket. Let's take Bernie Sanders. What does he bring to the table? He's got a rock hard constituency inside the Democratic Party. If he announced tomorrow that he was going to run for president, he's immediately taken seriously. Let's take Donald Trump. The only elected office he ever held was the presidency. What did he start with? He was a household name in America. Everybody knew who Donald Trump was. Those were his chips. So if you're going to bypass the normal system, you have to bring something to the table that helps you compete with those who've already served and may have prominence.
As an interest group, I don't really have a lot of money that I can give the candidate, but I'm trying to insert my own issues and have the candidates kind of pick them up for their campaign. So as someone who's an outside kind of interest group without having the money to really convince the candidate, what can I do to have the candidate pick up my issue and make that part of their, because if they have too many talking points on their platform, then people can't handle complexity. You know what I'm talking about?
You're trying to get a candidate to endorse your cause.
Yeah.
All right. And you got no money to give them.
I might be able to try to fundraise, but it's not been great. I gotta tell you the truth,
Okay.
man. It's not great.
All right. So here's all right. So I'm not going to mention the name, but I saw a campaign last year where a candidate for U.S. Senate got a visit from lobbyists for the crypto industry. And they said, we would like you to say nice things about crypto, and we would like your promise that you're not going to stand in the way of deregulation of crypto. That candidate says, you got it. Crypto funneled millions of dollars into his campaign. Crypto people. That's all they wanted to hear. That's pretty crass. But it happened. All right. Now, let's suppose the crypto people did not have millions of dollars to give him, but crypto people had a big email list or a lot of crypto investors that they might have sent to those crypto holders and say, XYZ candidate is good for our industry, is going to make it easier for you to trade on crypto. And we suggest that you send him $15 or $20 as soon as you can to help him in his campaign. So what crypto may not have been able to give him money, they could turn other people to make small contributions or asking people in that candidate state to vote for him. That's also something an interest group can do.
Okay.
So think about your following, which anybody can go to social media and create a following now.
Okay, so here's a quick question. I don't know the legality of this, but like I said, I am working with historical people, like the longest monthly incarcerated man in New York State history. And the thing is that, is it possible for us, and the disabled, is it possible for us to maybe put together like a blanket thing and then maybe sell it as a package? Because the thing is that I'm trying to fundraise for our own stuff. And, I think that a lot of times the candidates take us for granted. Maybe if they bought it, they would put us in more value. I don't know. Like, I'm not really crazy about monetizing this, but it's really such a struggle to really get them to take us. And I know we're competing with astroturfing, we're competing with crypto and all these other $1 million industries that really force their way to the table. All we have is our story. We don't really have money, real support. We have our narrative. That's about it.
Right. The other thing that you might be able to do is supply some reliable volunteers for them.
Okay.
Especially in local races.
All right.
It is hard to get people to go get signatures for you. It is hard to get people, especially in New York City, to get into
as someone who's been a worker and doing that for a while too, though, just so you know, a lot of the volunteers screw up and they don't they're not reliable, and their signatures don't validate the way sometimes the professionals do. So sometimes volunteers are varying quality. So you're not wrong.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. We're working on it.
There's an art to attracting volunteers, and then an even bigger art to keep them coming back.
I like that.
Yeah. So basically it's this. Your volunteers have to have a good time. And if they don't have a good time, they're not coming back. And whatever you ask them to do, it's something that they like to do, because otherwise they won't come back. So that's a whole nother meeting about how to keep a volunteer force happy.
Maybe you could share with us some of the previous work you've done, and also how people can contact you, and a little bit more about your services.
Okay. I put my email in the chat box.
Okay.
All right. So in a nutshell, I'm one of the luckiest people you will ever meet, because I discovered my passion when I was 17 years old. I discovered what I love to do. And as far as I'm concerned, I haven't worked a day since. When the fact of the matter is, I routinely work 7 days a week, 80 hours a week or more. So what happened was I grew up on a farm in Indiana. My father was a state legislator. My first door-to-door activity for him took place when I was 6 years old after school. I knocked on doors from him. I got bitten by a political bug. My father was military. He expected me to be very well read. And I became an absolute consumer of newspaper opinion pages when I was 13. And I knew more about politics than anybody other than my father in Blackford County by the time I was 17. That was my start. I love this stuff. I have worked in politics my entire life. There isn't anything I have not done or don't know how to do. And because I am a sponge for all things politics, of course, I keep up with the technology because to me, we have the best form of government known to humankind. It's called democracy. And there's always going to be fierce competition in the marketplace of ideas on how to make our system of government better and how to better provide for people who get slapped by the backhand of life. And to me, it's just fascinating business. So yeah, I started out low person on a totem pole right out of graduate school. And I was involved with 7 or 8 statewide races that first year. I then became a partner in a firm. And after 5 or 6 years, I went out on my own, which is typically the way things work. My secret is I had really wonderful mentors. Otherwise, I'd have been bankrupt at some point. Mentors that kept me out of trouble, stopped me from doing stupid things. Because every day I wake up, I'm smarter and better informed than the day I was before. I had the benefit of people who kept me out of trouble. So I'd say to anybody who wants to get into political consulting, your key thing is find a mentor that believes in you and is willing to look over your shoulder during your early years so that you do not stumble.
Amazing. Yeah. What do you think the future? I'm sorry. Susan had a question. I want to make sure she gets her question named. Go ahead, Susan. You had something you wanted to mention with it? Thank you so much for that.
About privacy. So there's all this information out there about all of us now. And isn't it in our Constitution to the right to have privacy? And doesn't some of this stuff sort of cross that boundary?
Yeah. Yeah. And to some extent, you still have it. Nobody can walk through your front door absent your permission and invade your privacy, at least in theory. That you have privacy behind. However, this is what's happened through the years. This data that L2 appends to voter files, most of it came from people who voluntarily provided it to somebody. So how do they know the credit scores of people on a voter list? It's because people applied for credit cards and banks sold that information to third parties. They know my credit score on L2. I looked it up. They know my income. They know my education level. Now, most of that information I have probably volunteered, except my credit score. Somebody else determines that. But I get a credit rating of some kind by banks or what have you. We all do. And those banks report that credit rating to third-party vendors, in other credit card companies so they know whether you're a worthy credit card holder or not. So we have voluntarily provided it to these social media companies that have collected it. This is how Zuckerberg got rich. It's what people volunteered on Facebook to Meta. So perhaps there should be better controls on how the social media companies and the tech companies better control on what they can do with that data. There are now firms in the country, I see them advertised on YouTube. It said, you want to erase anything and everything about you that's floating around in the atmosphere? Here, you can hire our company and we'll erase you. No information, including your address. I went looking for something on a voter file not long ago about certain public officials in New Mexico. And I noticed that even on L2, they had asked that their home address not be listed. Why? They're afraid of being doxxed or shot because they are controversial and they make difficult decisions, and that pisses people off. So I think this whole privacy thing has become muddled. And at some point going forward, every day we're waking up now and finding that the government knows more about us than we thought the government should know. Somebody's going to draw a line in the sand and say, you got to stop this.
I just want to interrupt, just say that I did hear my name and I was muted. I think DJ keeps muting me. I'm outside. Maybe I'm making a little noise. But I do have a question too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jay, how did you move to New York then? I'm just curious. What made you come? Yeah, because it's not, I'm going to mute myself, but go ahead.
Right. I won a speech contest when I was 17, and the reward was a week-long trip to New York City. They thought that speech contest was a really big deal, so that was the reward, and that was all she wrote.
Yeah, I saw that on your LinkedIn. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the minute my feet hit the ground at Union Square, I just looked up and said, I want to live here.
I agree with you. Cool.
Thank you. I do have another question. Yeah. So the thing is that sometimes people are, they have a consultant that they're using, and they want to know if is the consultant actually doing a good job. So they want to be able to see the results. So sometimes you see these polls, and sometimes the polls are predictive, like they seem to pretty spot on, and then sometimes the polls are off, right? So how can the person who's buying consultant services, how can they feel like they know like what they're paying for is working?
That begins early on in the relationship. The candidate has to have a chemistry with a consultant. Why? Because they're putting their career into the hands of a consultant who may have to make really critical decisions when the candidate is not able to make them. There's a lot at stake in the relationship between candidate and consultant. Candidate has to trust the wisdom, as you would a doctor who's about to cut your chest open and replace your heart. You're not in a position to tell that doctor how to do his job. You got to trust the doctor. And it's the same thing with consultants and candidates. And if you got questions about your doctor's integrity or character or skills, you shouldn't be hiring that doctor to do it. So that's one way. Now I have another, and I've seen this happen. In fact, it's my role in one particular campaign I'm involved with. I'm not involved in the day-to-day, but I have 2 calls a week with the candidate and the campaign manager and their team. They tell me everything they're doing, and they ask my opinion. And I will come back to them and say, this mail piece needs to be changed. This TV ad needs to be rewritten. You don't have your Facebook ad set up properly. In other words, I'm there kind of as a check on what they are doing to help them keep their vendors in line. I do play that role in a campaign I'm involved with. I've also been the lead consultant on other campaigns and learned that they also had someone looking at my stuff, just as a check. Now, it's a luxury to be able to afford someone like that, but it happens all the time. So I'd say it comes down to a matter of trust. You can also talk to other consultants, but usually if your consultant is doing something really silly, your own friends are going to say, what are you up to with this stuff? It's not making any sense.
But the patronage thing will never go away because it hasn't gone away in any country around the world. The moment you put humans together, we get around to our friend first. And the friends are the people who get us elected. And what gets our friend is our value system in a way. And I don't expect to be part of the administration if he wins.
You know, actually,
He still pick up his phone, but he
Theo,
secretly disagree with him.
Okay, I just want to jump in
Theo,
front
you would have been on mine, Theo.
I just want to
I
jump
would
in
have had
front
you on mine.
I just want to jump in front of for my friend right quick, Grace. Just so you know, who actually came out to my MLK day at National Action Network. Grace is really a district leader, right, and really establishing that local control and talking to her local, right, people that she knocks on the doors. She knows the people that's actually registered to vote in her neighborhood, and having those small winnable victories and putting you into place. And if she can control her election district and I control my election district, and I know you guys want that big podium, I'm not mad at that, but also control your election district. Then we can get together and we can pool I got my district, I get your district, and we can make our own little, agreements and get our things passed. Control the Manhattan Democrat Party was decided by 8 votes, and I was there. And I screamed and left because Theo got beat up in that election. But, I was part of that. So just once again, right, Grace is a prime example. And one of the things that, honestly, I hope everybody here really aspires to. Everybody wants to do this, do that, right, be on the big stage. Me too. But as a district leader, I want y'all to be district leaders, dead serious, please. That's what for me, that's a central part of the DGL7 vision right here for change. It's on by the way, it's on the What's Next part of the Unified Platform, USA.com. It says What's Next, and it talks about this plan precisely.
Bring it up right now!
And we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. We will have to carry on a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart. And